Hi, my name is John Sluter. A couple of weeks ago, a woman from my church, All Saints Episcopal Church in Riverside, asked me to put together a list of books that some of the youths and young adults that she has contact with might be interested in and might benefit from reading. In particular, we discussed the hostility in the present state of American politics, the mutual disdain, the inability to communicate across ideological lines, the tribal nature of our present politics. And I thought, well, how good would that be to have a list of books about people who managed to change society for the better. I focused on biographies and autobiographies. I think these are probably most interesting to youths and young adults. These just happen to be books that I found on my shelf or remembered. You might have some other books in mind, and it would be great if you could mention those books that came to your mind in the comments below. The first book I'll mention, and I'm mentioning them pretty much in random order, is Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. What I find fascinating about it is that he really does give the context of a lot of the difficult decisions that he made, decisions that were necessary as he strove to resist decades and decades of white supremacy and pilot his nation to a nation of true democracy. At one point, a conservative American newspaper, a couple of reporters from that newspaper interviewed him. They wanted to know why his organization embraced violence and why he didn't embrace the nonviolence of Martin Luther King. And he has an interesting discussion about the difference in the environment of the United States and in his own South Africa, and why that made the choices that Martin Luther King was able, with great courage, to make unavailable to him in his own native country. It would be interesting to listen in on a conversation between Nelson Mandela and Mohandas Gandhi. The name of his book is an autobiography. The subtitle is The Story of My Experiments with Truth. He, of course, was the great apostle of nonviolence. And it seems that his autobiography is written with young people and youths, young men and women specifically in mind. That's the impression I got from it. It's been a while. Since we've raised the issue of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in the United States, let's move on to a testament of hope. This is a collection of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letters and speeches and sermons. He was a great writer. There's also Strength to Love, a collection of his sermons. There are a lot of books with collections of his writings. Taylor Branch has written what has been called a magisterial trilogy about the civil rights movement. And I've read parts of this first book. I'm a great starter of books. Again, the fact that I don't necessarily finish it doesn't mean it's not a great book. I have read parts of this book, and what I did read, I did find to be wonderful. The other two books in the trilogy are Pillar of Fire and At Canaan's Edge. The next book that I'd like to discuss is called The Prison Angel. It's by Mary Jordan and Kevin Sullivan. They're two writers for the Washington Post. The subtitle is Mother Antonia's Journey from Beverly Hills to a life of service in a Mexican jail. The subtitle pretty much sums up the book. She was a middle-aged housewife who went through a divorce, was casting around for the next act in her life, and step by step became involved with inmates in a Mexican jail until she ended up founding an order of nuns and going to live in this jail to serve the least, the lost, and the lowest there. Now, this is a book by Paul Moses called The Saint and the Sultan. Let me read the subtitle. The Crusades, Islam, and Francis of Assisi's Mission of Peace. Francis of Assisi was subversive in his own way. He lived in a time that glorified violence, but he was a man of peace. He tagged along with crusaders during one of the crusades, and it was upon his heart to try to convert the sultan that opposed them to Christianity. St. Francis was not able to convert the sultan, but he formed a bond with the man because they discovered that they were kindred spirits. This is a marvelous story of people from vastly different and hostile traditions forging a bond across the barriers that separated them. Great book. Lincoln's Bishop by Gustav Niebuhr. Let me read the subtitle. A President, a Priest, and the Fate of 300 Dakota Sioux Warriors. I should put my old man glasses on so I can read the subtitles easier. Anyway, another great book about a missionary bishop, and it's about his advocacy for the Indians after what one can only characterize as a horrendous slaughter of white settlers. But he felt that many of the Indians who had been condemned to be hanged were sentenced and convicted unjustly on very little evidence. And he also felt that there were equities on the side of the Native Americans that many did not understand. So he undertook to approach Abraham Lincoln and persuade Abraham Lincoln to intervene in the case, to review the record. Here's another good book. Our Man in Charleston by Christopher Dickey, subtitled Britain's Secret Agent in the Civil War South. It's about England's consul in the city that was the epicenter for the movement toward the Civil War. And what he did was very important. He probably changed history, because there were strong political pressures in England to wade into the Civil War on the side of the South, to use its navy to break the Union blockade that kept the South from selling its cotton overseas. England depended upon this cotton for its cotton mills, which employed a lot of people in England. But what this consul did was he gave information to Great Britain's foreign minister, which kept England from slipping into the Southern cause and rendering assistance to them. And he did that by describing bluntly what slavery was like, and also by revealing the doublespeak of the South's promises about what they would do to reform slavery. What he did took great courage, because he constantly had to conceal, this consul had to constantly conceal his revulsion about what he saw and what he heard, because if what he really believed became known, he would have been expelled or possibly murdered. The next book that I want to discuss is called Holding the Line by Jeffrey Berman. The subtitle is Inside the Nation's Preeminent U.S. Attorney's Office and Its Battle with the Trump Justice Department. Well, the subtitle tells you probably as much as you need to know to determine whether you want to read it or not. I would say that Jeffrey Berman is not a Democrat, he's a Republican, and in fact he worked on Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. I can't find my copy of the other book that I want to talk about now. It's by Steve Inskeep, and it's called Differ We Must. It's about Abraham Lincoln. It's about how Abraham Lincoln turned people who are strongly opposed to him around and made them friends, made them allies. Wonderful book. Abraham Lincoln was invaluable to America, and what it took to keep the Union together, not only to reclaim the states that had seceded, but also to keep the states that had not seceded all moving in the same direction. It's hard to overestimate the subtlety and the intellectual effort and the political will that took. For a general overview of Abraham Lincoln, it's hard to beat Carl Sandburg's book, Abraham Lincoln. Well, 7 volumes of book. If I were starting out, I suppose that I would read the abridged edition, which is 3 volumes, and then if it left me with an appetite for more, I would read the longer version. Let's finish up with How to Stand Up to a Dictator by Maria Ressa. She's a journalist in the Philippines who reported on the extrajudicial killings of the administration of President Duterte. And she suffered oppression, including numerous court cases. They tried to silence her by putting her in prison. She was convicted many times. So far, she has had all of the convictions quashed. I think there may be one pending, but this is a great book about her history in the Philippines, her reportage, and instruction about what it takes to resist that kind of pressure, that kind of oppression. This has been just a very personal list of books that I happen to know about that might help young people deal with these strange times that we're going through. You probably have other books that may be even better, and if you do, why don't you list them in the comment section below.